All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Larry Murphy, Chair of the Newbury Planning Board, and this is a workshop this afternoon to discuss and consider certain proposed amendments to the zoning bylaws. And we do have a quorum present. To my left, we have
Scott Kinter, member.
Woody Knight.
and
Mary Stone.
Mary Stone. Thank you, Mary. I'd like to start with just a brief explanation of the procedure. We have had some questions about when public input might be permitted, in the deliberations. And there are several steps to getting a zoning article on the warrant. The first step is what we're engaged in here is to develop draft bylaws, in this case, to forward to the select board. Once we've done that, then they'll be forwarded to the select board, who in turn, if they deem it appropriate, will turn around and send it back to us for a public hearing. And at that point, there will be ample opportunity for the public to weigh in on the drafts. After the public hearing, and I'd also like to welcome our member Peter Pecos. Peter? After the public hearing, we'll send it back to the select board, and at that point, they'll make a determination whether or not to put the articles on the warrant. So there won't be an opportunity for public input today. The purpose of today's meeting is for the board members to share their ideas and understanding about the proposed bylaw amendments. So Martha, unless you or Kristen have anything to add, we can just turn it over to Ian.
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
Great.
Ian, welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you. And a reminder, everyone, Ian Burns with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, working with all of you on your MBTA Communities bylaw amendment. My colleague Kayla Rennie, who's been working with me, is a bit under the weather today and unfortunately couldn't make it. So you're stuck listening to me the whole time here tonight. We've had several meetings with you all and with the public. We had one at the town library a couple weeks ago to get feedback from folks about the proposed zoning amendment here for the MBTA Communities bylaw. From what I've gleaned from talking with Martha and Kristen and hearing from all of you, is today we really want to nail down the specifics on what you all are comfortable with in this bylaw and how this can take its final draft form. So that way, at your next meeting on the 17th, you can approve it to be sent over to the select board. We're gonna, I think, go over a couple things today. This is really for you all to give your input, and I'm not doing any big presentation. Want it to be mostly discussion based today. A couple of things that we want to make sure that we figure out part of today's discussion. Number one is the actual area that we're going to be proposing this overlay district to zone over. So as you'll recall, we had several sub-districts that we were considering as a part of this bylaw, and we really want to figure out which one or which combination of them we are going to be moving forward with at this time. As a part of that, kind of intertwined with it, we're also going to be taking a look at the bylaw language, and the reason why I say it's intertwined with the actual districts themselves is, as many of you will recall, we can change the dimensional parameters and the design guidelines and other facts of the actual zoning from sub-district to sub-district. So in some of these districts that we're considering, you might say we want this one to be a little denser. In other districts, you might say we want there to be less density over here. All that matters is that on average we're reaching compliance, so we can play around with those dimensional requirements from each sub-district. So I want you to keep that in mind, because that might inform which combination of the sub-districts we move forward with, because you might say that some will be best for less units and some will be best for more, and so that we can keep that in mind when we look through the actual zoning language. The other components of the zoning language we'll want to touch upon are those design guidelines, which we discussed a little while ago, and then just getting your input and approval on some of the affordability requirements we're considering as part of this bylaw as well. So with that in mind, if it makes sense, I thought maybe we'd look at, and I'll zoom in on the map. You all have seen this a couple times, but I thought we'd take a look at the sub-districts and get everybody's input. I'll give a quick summary of kind of what we've heard from folks, I think, throughout this process. So there's kind of 5 main areas split up in 2 sections that we're calling Newbury North and Newbury South. So the North District here is made up of these 3 main sub-districts, and then the South District made up of these 2 main sub-districts. The general consensus we've heard a lot of feedback on all of the districts, but the one that I think had the least interest, I would say, would be the one up here on Scotland Road. So as we've been discussing with folks, we were thinking it might make sense at this time to really be considering the 4, the 2 in the north and the 2 in the south, and no longer consider along Scotland Road, but looking for input from the planning board members. A couple other things to keep in mind that we're discussing is, right along Route 1 here, this collection of parcels, maybe that makes sense to be a little denser than maybe the one right adjacent to the elementary school. Similarly, down here, maybe your parcels right where we're sitting right now here on Kent Way makes sense to be a little denser than the ones over here on, not Hanover Street, what's the street name down here? Central Street, thank you. So that's kind of our initial thoughts that we were considering, but curious on your all perspectives, and I can zoom in as you wish to take a look at these individually, but would open it up for comments or thoughts on those proposed districts right now.
Anybody?
What, so the Scotland Road piece,
Mm-hmm.
when you say less interest,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean by that?
So there were concerns around Scotland Road being a much more rural area of town, and so having multifamily there might be more of a visual impact than folks may be looking for on that spot. Additionally, some concerns about it directly abutting the Little River up there, and just generally where would the multifamily fit. It seemed to some of the comments that we heard that was the biggest outlier out of the collections that we had when we considered them all together.
I think on both sides of the parcel is conserved agricultural land, so I know that question came up at the select board meeting about just this sort of, as you're driving in on Scotland and you're seeing all the farmland, what's the prospect of that kind of density on that parcel? But it's,
And how many acres is that piece?
That piece is 10 acres, 10.8.
I think right now they have just 2 single-family homes on there, though.
That's correct.
Yep.
Correct. There's a lot of wetlands there.
Sorry, the 2 parcels together are 11, over 11 acres there.
So if we could tease this one out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are kind of, concerns with restrictions because of conservation and account of the wetlands that are in that area. However, keeping this as an alternative with something small,
Mm-hmm.
with significant design parameters on it, I think is an option. It is adjacent to Newburyport, so its ability for a developer to pull in potentially water and surge is a lot greater, which means that there'd be reduced overhead, there'd be the cost of the tie-in, but there wouldn't be the management of the septic and the wells and all that sort of stuff. So that can offset maybe some of the construction costs. I don't know, but I'd like to keep as many options open as possible. However, I like the idea of maybe something smaller there, with specific design parameters to make it look what we would want it to look like. So I wouldn't throw it out yet. At least that's my thought.
And when you say design parameters, are you thinking, like, for example, putting a limit on the number of units in a structure so you couldn't, like, let's say, for example, each structure can only have 5 units in it or something like that, where it's a bit more?
In 2-story,
Sure,
rather than
yep.
going to a 3-story.
Yeah.
And maybe even how it looks, what it's going to look like from the roadway.
Mhm.
Because you could make something that looked like a farmhouse or an extended farmhouse. Just getting creative design that, hey, it might just work. It might just be very cost effective, and it's close to the trail, and it's got all these other benefits.
Sure.
It's one of the only places that's right next to water and sewer.
Yeah, actually, I think not sewer. I think Newburyport had said to a developer who was potentially looking at it that there might be a water tie-in. I don't think there was any
Okay.
possibility of sewer at that point. Scott, something different.
I wasn't that close to it, but I think, with any type of connection, it typically is some mitigation. So I suspect you're going to get the water. You could probably get the sewer at that location. You may have to put a lift station, pump it into a gravity line, but it is close to the train. And when I mention, when I say mitigation, out of some design parameters or some things you'd want to push onto the developer would be maybe it's a walkway, from across the street, all the way to the station. So this, I'm with you, Peter, I see some opportunity there.
You know, again, we're just zoning. We're not constructing, we're just zoning, so I think it still has life, especially with this type of a conversation.
Mm.
Yeah, so because you have, given the amount of land that's being considered right now, we have flexibility to be much less dense in some of these areas. Because as is right now, if you were to zone at the density required on all of these parcels, you would be far and above what is required of the town. However, we could do some more flexible zoning in, if we want to take everything we're considering right now, we could be much less dense in some of those other areas and maybe more concentrate that reach your minimum requirement in a more concentrated area, but then have some other options spread out, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think optionality is good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if that's 11 acres and the zoning is 15 units per acre, so if that piece got approved, would we be, anybody that came in wanted to develop that piece, could they lean on our zoning, which is 15?
We could do it less than 15 units an acre there.
Okay.
That's the key, is that you don't have to be 15 units an acre everywhere. You can spread out that density, so on average be at 15 units an acre. There's also some options to put like all the compliance in one spot at that 15 units an acre and spread it out and have a lot less over on Scotland Road, so it doesn't all have to be 15 units an acre. Yeah. We can be under that.
And that's where the flexibility is really quite beneficial.
Yes.
Yeah, you might go for something much smaller, but still a home run because it's doable because of the water and the sewer.
And remembering that you're not, because the zoning allows for it, doesn't necessarily mean that today you're approving a project at 15 units an acre. A project would still have to come forward at 15 units an acre, which if the zoning, let's say, allowed 15 units an acre in theory, the project would have to be pretty perfect to get to get there. I'd be surprised if one came forward in that capacity. Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm not a big fan of C. I see it's the gateway to the great pasture out there that extends all the way along that side of Scotland Road.
Mm-hmm.
I see the river, little river there. It swells into that property. The property's very wet. That being said, also there is sewer and water in the industrial park, but there's some distance. It is close to the train station, but it isn't close to the train station. You walk through an industrial park to get to the train station from there. And the river crossing, I mean, I'm not a big construction guy, but the river would be a challenge to continue sewer through there. I look at A and B on that end of town as being better locations to the proximity of the train station for foot traffic to get there, and there's sewer and water at the school, and there's sewer and water right in the proximity of the other piece. I forget which one's A and which one's B.
Yeah. With the dynamic map, we don't have it lettered here, but we had originally talked about this Route 1 being A and this was B, and then we tacked on C, which is why that's C over here. But yeah, A here, B here, C was over here.
Yeah, the C with the two houses on it. I mean, they're there and whatnot, but it's a challenging site as far as how wet that is and how. We've had plenty of rain in the last year, but over time we've had rainstorms and the Little River swells pretty good right there. So. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Mary, anything you want to add?
No, I'm all set, thanks.
No. I don't honestly have any strong feelings about that site one way or the other, to be honest with you. It was the only real, I don't want to say pushback, it's too strong a word, but the comments we got with the select board did revolve around that site. That being said, it's a lot easier to remove something in the future than to add something. So I would be inclined to keep it at this point, and recognizing that we may need to revisit that at some point.
I will add to, I should say, It wasn't complete dissent. We did receive one comment that liked that district particularly, not from either of the boards. A member of the public expressed there. It was the only one that we had. So in aggregate, out of the maybe half dozen comments we got, that was the one that stuck out to people. But there was a resident that expressed interest in that one specifically. So there are certainly folks out there that have been in favor of it.
So let's talk about if we do consider this and we want to put restrictions on it, how would that look now as we're doing this process? How do we button that up and keep it, the contained idea that we might be thinking, if we wanted to?
I think a great start is the 2-story height limit, like you referenced. In a lot of the areas right now, we're talking about 3 stories. So I think maybe we say like a 2-story height limit, or you could say 2 stories or 35 feet with a tapered roof, however you wanted to word that. So maybe you put that in there. I think another beneficial way to make that a little bit less dense or more appetizing for folks is to split up the actual structures, and so restricting there being one large one one structure that has all the units, but saying maybe you have to cut it up a little bit more so that it's not all 30 units in one structure, but maybe 5, 5, and 5. I don't know, whatever that looks like. So those would be the 2 off the bat that are the easiest. Then you could talk about actual design of building facades or building massing, roof lines, that sort of thing that could be added into.
So continuing the teasing, what is like the rate, what number doesn't make sense? What number doesn't make sense for somebody to build? Is 4 units per 2 to 3 buildings, does that not make sense? So if we're talking like 8 or 10 unit limit, does that?
It depends on the type of project that they're doing, I would say, and luckily you have some members of the board that are in the development world, but thinking about our affordability component, for example, it may be harder with an affordability component to make the numbers work out depending on how many units are going on that site. That goes back to why in the affordability part we were putting a threshold for over 10 units, that's when it kicks in. Splitting up the buildings, I think it varies. I have not talked to anybody in the development world specifically about kind of what's the threshold there, but what I have seen on different bylaws has been trending more in like the 6 to 8 units per structure type of setup. However, if you were doing ownership units and they could sell each condo at $800,000, then they're going to get a return on their investment, but it all depends on what kind of housing you want to see there. And so if they have to get a return on their investment and we're only allowing 5 units there, they have to price them pretty high. But if we're allowing more units there, they can price them lower. So I think it just depends on what we want to see over there.
I mean, there's so many variables. Some of the cost of the land would impact,
Yep.
what could be a feasible project for a developer.
It might
Also the
be,
infrastructure.
if they can tie into the sewer and water, it might be more feasible then as compared to some of your other sites where they might not be able to tie into sewer and water.
Because I'm very sensitive to what you're saying, but I also try to figure out, I don't want to do something that if we say this is what we want and it's something very aberrant from what our intent is, because we've seen that happen before, right?
It may be worthwhile to consider putting a minimum or a maximum. Let's say for example you put in there maximum 5 units per structure on the site. Then you could say with a special permit you can go up to 8, and then that would allow you all some more discretion over how those 8 units end up looking in the end. So you're allowing the developer to get up to 8 units to maybe get a better return on their investment, but they have to then go through the special permit process.
So is this cost effective to make something small like that? If we're trying to, get into an affordable ballpark range, if they're going to say apartments, if we're, again, apartments, condos, big bucks, little bucks.
It's all box, right?
Yeah.
So, you'd have to, first off, the cost of the land, it's going to be a cost to getting water and sewer. So you're going to have some significant cost there. If you're going to spread that cost over, 5 units, nobody would ever look at that. If you brought that to 35 units, and if it was, an affordable project, that would be 25% of the 35 would be affordable. And most developers, they perceive really the the land for the affordables they tend, when they do their underwriting, they'll only put a land price per unit on the market rate stuff. On the affordable units, they won't put, they'll basically value that land as zero in the underwriting. So getting back to really density, it would need to be, you know, kind of north of 35, I think, for anybody to be interested. And it would, you know, in my opinion, you know, it wouldn't be one structure, you know, it could be 6 structures, you know, 5 units, 6 units apiece, townhomes, design parameters to make it, or require them to make it more like a farm home look. I mean, that would be, we could require that.
Is the 35 units based on 25% being affordable? Because we can dial it down to 10%.
Well, for MBTA communities purposes, we can only require
Right, so
up to 10%.
this isn't for like a 40B.
Right.
Right.
This is,
So we'd be doing 10%, not 25% affordable here.
But could you, I guess, kill 2 birds with 1 stone? You know, if you had MBTA zoning, and then you had a 40B, could you get 25%? So we satisfy a 40B situation and the MBTA zoning requirements?
No, not necessarily. The only way that would work out is if you have a current 40B proposal happening, and then you wanted to put your MBTA zoning where that current 40B proposal is. And that's a bit of a different process, but you wouldn't be able to say, put a 40B here, we're gonna zone it for 10%, but then court a 40B to go there. Probably because once you have by right 10%, I would be surprised if the developer would come in and say, I wanna do 25% instead.
so dialing the percentage down to 10%, is 35 still the number, or does it drop down to 25?
I mean, it could.
I mean, this is not my,
No, but at the end of the day, it's all about really the underwriting. You know, what the cost is, what the return will be, and then a lot of folks would end up backing into what density works. But it wouldn't be 5 or 6 units. I'm pretty confident.
okay, I don't want to get hung up in building it. I just want to we're just here to zone it. Yeah, but it's
Yeah, I mean, if you're
helpful for
talking
me to understand it.
35 units, I mean, that's on average a little over 3 units an acre, which is, again, is fine when we have density elsewhere. And so, like, that's not super dense in terms of
Yeah.
actual density. I cut you off, Kristen.
Just, what's the excluded land on that? Are we actually talking about 11 acres?
It's a little bit under with the excluded piece. Let me scroll over. So 10 acres roughly.
And
That density denominator.
can you have mixed use there?
As currently
through
written,
MBTA?
we wouldn't.
3 units for it.
You can allow it, we can't mandate it.
That would, over 10 acres, that would be 30 units, right?
Because that'd be cool to have your farm,
Farm look.
imagine
You could create it
a
for
farm
you.
stand
Yeah.
there that also included housing. So it could be a gateway for real. I mean, it's such an interesting parcel, just going from the industrial zone straight to farmland, like it couldn't be more
Yeah.
different. So,
Right, yeah, because
I don't know.
basically you hit a city, hit a city look once you go from the pasture.
there certainly is small scale residential, you know, farther along the road. It's not residential, but that's not the sort of immediate.
Should we put a pause on this one and go look at other places and come
Yeah,
back?
probably.
Otherwise, we'll be here for like a long time just talking about this one parcel.
Something else to consider too is we can put like a maximum units per parcel or per lot. So if we want to come back to that and say 35 was our magic number, we could say anything about 35 you need a special permit, but you can get 35 units by right or something like that. These are the 2 other ones in this area that we've been considering, I think, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this A Route 1, in addition to probably the area we're sitting in right now, Kent Way, were the areas where we were considering the higher density to get you in compliance.
That's the one on the west side of Route 1?
It's on both sides, so Route 1 goes right down the middle.
Okay.
So here's the east side of Route 1, here's the west side of Route 1. So these three kind of groups here we're considering as one sub-district, so they all have the same parameters. But then this one over here, this collection of 3 parcels next to Newberry Elementary would have different dimensional parameters likely.
Right, and I think we had talked even about reducing that one back down to just one parcel at one point, but we haven't discussed that with the board.
Yeah, there was consideration of not having this what's highlighted in blue now being a part of these groupings, and just doing it's hard to see that parcel or this parcel too, but sorry, can't see over that.
And the reason, Martha?
Just purely for the amount of land that you're talking right now, in terms of how you're above what's needed for compliance, if that would be more palatable politically for residents if we cut down a little bit. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you're also in that back one, you're abutting a little bit more of that wetland area. I mean, it's all nearby, but it's a little bit more towards the open space.
How many acres does this sit, is one piece?
This one over here, one second, sorry. We have 22 acres there. It's 16 when you subtract out the excluded land, so that wetland area. And then this one is 16.8, and it's about just under 15 when you take out that excluded land. So 22 and 15 roughly. I'm sorry, 17 and 15 roughly.
And you still got ample capacity for the 15 units per acre?
Yes. Because I mean, when you think about it, 22 acres doesn't take a lot to get you to 15 unit, to get you to your unit capacity, and 15 units an acre at that amount of land. And so if the board likes keeping these 2 districts in, which is what I mean, from the public comments, we heard some relatively good feedback on these. One thing we would recommend would be, again, having more of the density concentrated on that A grouping along Route 1, and then maybe less along Hanover Street. And that can take any number of shape, whether it's height restrictions or the actual design guidelines of how we might want structures to look along those areas.
Right, especially given that's in a much more residential area. And so we could even do something, if we don't need to get the density there, we could do something like allow triplexes and nothing larger than that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You're referring to Hanover Street with the triplexes, you said?
Yeah.
And then have a higher density out on Route 1?
Right.
Yes.
I think we've heard some interest, and not necessarily in Newbury, but when we talked about lower density in other communities, we've been floating around that like triplex or fourplex area for allowing a bunch of fourplexes in an area, something like that. Which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are a couple areas in Newbury right now that probably have 4 units in one structure.
Caldwell Farm does.
Yeah. So that would be the thought process there, I think.
So in the draft bylaw we have here, these aren't spelled out.
Correct. Since we hadn't decided on districts, we didn't spell it out specifically, but what we'd be proposing is essentially saying that Hanover Street, I think 4 plexes make sense, but if that's not comfortable, you can do another one. And then in that Route 1, we wouldn't necessarily be restricting the number of units in a structure, we'd just be saying how big the structure itself can be. So I think we're looking at a 3-story height limit along Route 1. And then
Now,
just
is that
setbacks
35 or
up.
40 feet? Because
I believe it was 40 feet,
Yeah, I think so.
and it's measured,
Well, we measure height from mean grade to mean height of the highest roof is in our definition right now. but we could have a separate definition for
Yeah.
this, I believe, so.
And when we're talking, one of the thoughts with that too is one of the things in the design guidelines for all districts is we were requiring angled roof lines and not flat roofs. So that's going to factor in if they can't really put units underneath the eaves at the top floor, then we need a little bit more height to make it look maybe more appealing with the angled roof as opposed to a flat roof.
Because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, our maximum height, roof height is 35
It's
feet.
35, right.
So it'd be 5 extra feet. And again, thinking that makes only sense along Route 1 compared to other areas.
And not to get off topic, but I found it a little confusing in the draft, where you're talking about 40-foot roof height if it's behind 30, I'm not expressing this very well. It talks about the units along the roadway have to have a maximum of 35 feet, but anything behind that could go up to 40 feet. Am I understanding that correctly?
It was recommending that with structures of varying heights, so one of the pictures we showed you was one multifamily structure where they had shorter buildings right abutting the road and taller buildings in the back. So that is that part of the design guidelines, basically saying put your shorter buildings in front and your taller buildings in back.
And if you don't have buildings in back, what's the maximum height on the front buildings, 35 to 40 feet? I was a little confused.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't think we explicitly wrote that out, so it's a good question to add in there. And so as written, we're not requiring different structures, and so if they did one structure as written, you would end up with 40 feet anywhere.
And that supports 3 stories.
Correct.
And 35 feet, you can't get 3 stories, you can only get 2 stories.
We could write it like that, but it'd be very hard. I mean, from a developer's point of view, we think an average of 12 stories, so it'd be 36 technically, but
Yeah, 12 feet.
12 feet, thank you.
Stories. But,
12
yeah.
feet.
So, I mean, if you look at say you had 2.5 stories, so you'd have 2 full stories, and then you'd have some dwelling units in the half story in the roof with dormers or something, but they would not be full size.
But I mean, I guess
At
I'm
35 feet.
anticipating some of the comments we might get. What's the justification from going 35 to 40 feet? Is it going to increase the number of units?
Yeah, so for our purposes here, it would increase to get that 3 stories in there, and so saying 40 feet, it increases the number of units, so we can put all of our density, or most of our density here, and then again, saying maybe somewhere else is just 4plexes. And the 40 feet really allows for the 3 stories, the 35 is tight, and would be difficult in a realistic scenario.
Right, and just to add to that, the calculations, the unit density and calculations that are on here are all based on 3 stories, the 40 feet, and also the setbacks of 50 feet at the front yard and 25 feet at the other. So that's been kind of the constant so far in doing the calculations for the yield, the theoretical yield on these parcels.
Which is another good reminder that these can't be directly abutting the road either, so we still have like a 50-foot setback on these parcels too from the road.
Well, I don't know, getting back to the original question, in terms of those districts, I wouldn't reduce them at this point.
Reduce.
Well, they were talking about whether or not they wanted to take out some portion of...
Of B.
Yeah.
We talked about that maybe.
So you're, go for the whole pie and then.
Pretty much.
Yep, okay. Fire apparatus wise, can they go 3+ stories, 4 stories? But does our equipment go that high? Because you want to be above that height of firefighter.
Yeah, I'm not sure how high our ladder truck goes.
Because you got a zone for it, you have to have the equipment for it, if it ever gets built.
We could find out. Newburyport must have fire ladders that can go up that high.
I gosh darn 2 fires at one time, right? And that's how stuff happens.
We'll ask the question.
Do you know?
No, I do not. No.
Well, it seems to me to make sense, and I'm confusing the letter designations, but to keep Hanover Street less dense
Sure.
in the other one.
Yeah. I think that's what we will
So-
plan to do for your final draft. I mean, like you said at the beginning, there's plenty more meetings to go through here.
Yeah. Yeah, what we're putting together here is not likely to be the final iteration of this.
Kicking it around, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to look at the southern portion now?
Is everyone?
Any other comments up
we all
here?
in accord on that?
Also,
Yeah.
Just one comment on the Scotland Road one, kind of thinking about it. You know, as we just said, we've got 50-foot and 25-foot setbacks with the river. Maybe we look at greater setbacks for that parcel if we're going to keep it in, as well as, you know, a denser, a less dense
There's
typology.
only gonna be more water.
Right, right.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. I'm gonna add a comment so I can remember to go back. In that case, we'll take a look at the southern area of town, Byfield, where we are right now. So a little bit simpler because we're just talking two areas, and it really is just two parcels too. There's only one lot in each area. So similar to up north with Hanover Street and Route 1, considering it being a little denser where we're sitting right now along Kent Way, and then less dense here along Central Street. One of the great points that Kristen brought up at our public meeting that some folks at in the public seemed receptive to, that we're bringing up the pros and cons of this district that we hadn't talked about along Kent Way here, is, as you all know, we're basically sitting in a sea of parking right now and impermeable surface, and so if it was redeveloped, there's kind of a good opportunity to make it a bit more environmentally friendly abutting the river than what it is right now. Right now you got a lot of runoff, and so there's some advantage there if 5, 10, 20 years in the future it gets redeveloped, it would be primed to be able to add in some mitigating factors for runoff and other environmental concerns into the river. So just wanted to highlight that, but we were thinking potentially denser here and less dense here, similar to how we were talking about up north, but would appreciate your thoughts on all of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, personally, I think of all of the parcels, this one here is the one that lends itself to the greater density.
Mm-hmm.
Kent Way parcel.
Sure.
And along the idea of the river, and maybe doing some mitigation, forward thinking, you know, appropriate buffers, you know, between adjacent properties, so that we can create some sort of a protective environment next to the river, and then if we go with this other parcel off Central, that it be in this, that the density be in the central aspect of that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that we can kind of create a, you know, I don't want to say a hidden look, but, you know, something that's more palatable to the adjacent properties.
Maybe we increase the side yard setbacks here along Central Street, instead of it being what it is right now. Is it 15-25 or 15-15 we have?
I think it's 15-25.
Yeah, so maybe we consider, and this is just across everywhere, so I'm just adding comments for myself for later. To encourage more of that central development, which I think makes sense.
Well, I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned it, but that parcel, you probably wouldn't even be able to see it from Central Street, would you?
You wouldn't see it, well, it depends on how it's laid out, you know, again, we're not developing it, we're zoning it. But if we put in the parameters so that if it were to get developed, that we would know that it couldn't be this very large, obtuse thing that everybody's going to be looking at from all aspects. And, you know, keeping the open space further away from the roadway, where in fact you might want the open space closer to the roadway or more along the contiguous borders.
Yeah, now this is that 10-acre parcel next to the fire station, right? Yeah.
Correct.
You can almost have a village type of feel to it, you know?
And so perhaps here we encourage the open space to be along the, abutting properties, to ensure that that's, more shielded from the actual development.
Where is Locken Road on that? Do I see Locken Road?
It's down here.
Down the bottom corner there?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
So it's not that far from, the corner of that property is not far from Locken Road.
Correct. And so what we might do is do pretty similar dimensional requirements for Central Street and Hanover Street. Might be worth considering keeping, Central Street, we might specify more, like we were just saying, the interior development of the parcel itself, but in terms of the structures allowing, maybe we keep the same, if it's fourplexes up north, it's fourplexes down in the south, just for consistency across the bylaw, so a developer doesn't get lost reading through all the different stipulations of each parcel. But it might be easiest to approach it that way. Similarly, maybe keeping similar densities with Kent Way as with the Route 1 collection of parcels. Some similar densities.
I think part of what I think about is how to explain this to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So if there any
Yes.
chance there are of ways to kind of make it clear and consistent.
That way we can say these
Potentially
groups are this,
develop
and these
this.
groups are this, and not like number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this, number 4 is this,
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, that's
By the
very.
time you get to number 4, everyone doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And the reason why you're thinking of them differently,
right.
because we're sensitive to the, to the neighborhood, to the existing parcels that are there. I think it's, yeah.
Yeah, not to simplify to any, not to have any negative response to the simplification of it, but to the extent we can clarify, helps everybody, I think.
Understand.
And there is some parallelness. I don't think we started out looking for that, but there's some logical distinctions between the denser sites that are probably more appropriate for higher density versus sites that are in more residential areas. We want to maintain some, I think anything with zoning, you're thinking about transition areas, so if you're already in a residential neighborhood like Central Street, just looking at the lot layout, it makes sense to think of that in a sort of less dense scenario than probably this parcel here.
What is this size of this parcel again?
the Central Street one? Or
No,
right here?
Kent Way.
Kent Way.
10.25 acres,
So they're roughly about the same size.
right,
What's Central?
9.99, 10.
Thank you.
You can round up.
At the library presentation, did the Kent Way, did you show an option that was a little bigger than that?
I don't believe so. I think we had several iterations ago, we had included some of the properties along here, but I don't think we had had that in a little while. I think this is what we had in the library presentation.
Yeah, I think these are exactly what we had at that presentation.
It might have been a different zoom level of the screenshot, so it could look different, yeah.
So now I'm gonna throw a complete curveball out there. We zone this, right? Is this more appealing for development to happen in these sites now?
So at 15 units an acre, and what do we have, 11 on the Kent Way?
Yeah,
So that's it's about 165, right?
sure.
I think it's a tough site still at that density on that piece. That's why I asked if we ever considered, or if I thought I may have saw, but maybe it was a Zoom. But you've got the entrance into Kent Way, You got a piece as you're driving in to your right. I think a developer would be very interested in that piece, like north, like a couple hundred units. Higher density, 3 and 4 story stuff. That's probably where you'd want to put it.
Which are you talking about?
Can't,
Back here or back here?
yeah, you
Sorry,
got,
it's blocking the.
see the road coming in to Town Hall? You include that,
Let me zoom over.
Just all those lots?
yeah.
So is one of those a town-owned lot, Martha?
Over on the left-hand side is a
Yeah.
town-owned lot. The town acquired it a number of years ago for recreational purposes.
I mean, one of the things worth considering too is, this, given the conditions of the site as it exists right now, probably a developer wouldn't come in tomorrow because, like you're saying, it's not really appetizing in its current state. That's why we're giving options across more than just this one parcel, and hopefully, if they don't like this, they like Central Street or like somewhere else.
And again, we're zoning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're not building.
And so maybe 20 years from now, the conditions are different, and you've now set the zoning today, so that 20 years from now, maybe the conditions are different, and all of a sudden it's good. Yeah.
The town-owned parcel adjacent to Kent Way, what is it? Is that all high ground, so to speak?
There's wetlands, at least on that portion, yeah, where the blue is, where you're crossing into it from Kent Way.
You said it was purchased for or acquired for agricultural purposes?
Not for
Recreation.
agriculture, for recreational.
So it's not parkland or anything like that?
No, it's not designated parkland.
And how big is that parcel?
5.4 acres.
So you're adding 50% to the...
I mean, based on the way that we've seen this play out in other communities, what I would recommend at this time would be to keep it simple in this area, and you could add more in there. It's totally your purview to do that. Given what we've shown the public so far, it may be best to keep it as is, instead of adding too much to it at this current time, but.
Well, I unfortunately missed the presentation at the library, but
Oh.
was there any pushback on any of these districts?
Not necessarily. There was some really great questions about each of them individually. If we heard any, I'm trying to think if we heard any particularly negative comments about them as a whole. Folks were really trying to digest it and were asking really good questions about them. Most of the questions we had resolved around the regulations themselves and what's required of the town, and things like what are we risk if we're not compliant. But I was actually pleasantly impressed with the feedback we got, because I didn't hear a lot of negative reviews. Correct me if I'm wrong, for folks that were there.
No, the only thing I recall was just the proximity to the Parker River.
What?
The proximity of the Kent Way
Yes.
and the other one to the Parker River. One gentleman had something to say.
Sure.
Did you get the sense that people understood what we were talking about?
I wasn't in the audience, so I guess I can't speak to that, but I got the sense more than other communities based on the questions they were asking. So we got some pretty great questions, and they're not coming to my mind right now, but I remember sitting there and thinking like, all right, they're processing this. I think certainly at the end we talked to a few folks and there were still a few misconceptions, but I thought it was a good start to
Okay.
keep the communication going. But folks that were in the audience, I don't know how you felt it went.
Yeah,
This
how
is a
many-
very complex thing to digest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here in the weeds. You can imagine what it's like to be sitting on in the bench, you know, in the stands, shall we say.
Yeah.
With where we're sitting right now, too, Kent Way, Kristen had a great point that if anything was to change here, because we zoned this for MBTA, it would only be an improvement. And I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that this particular parcel seemed like a good one to consider to begin with, because as of all of them, the redevelopment potential could be, you know, very beneficial. But I'm just going over, you know, comments and questions that were asked. There were, as Ian said, you know, some comments and concerns about, you know, environmentally sensitive areas, and some people found that for the north, the A and B ones, their proximity to the school was a big plus, and C was not so appealing. But as Ian said, C, the Scotland Road parcel, has been more appealing to other people. And people trying to get their heads wrapped around some of the parameters that we've set, like the lot coverage versus the open space.
It's not often that even the public gets involved in the minutia of zoning. And so when we're talking about the real specifics here, it gets, like Martha said, when we talk about lot coverage versus open space requirement versus impermeable surface, it's, you get lost. And so it's a balance between keeping it simple so they understand it, but also making sure they have the information so they don't feel like they've been deceived. Like, I don't want people to think we're hiding anything from them, but we also don't want to give you so much that you're confused. You know?
How does this impact me? That's what they're thinking. What does this do to me, for me, with me?
And I think a good reminder, one of the things we were talking about with a resident in another community recently too was, what does it do for me? I mean, thinking about the land that you currently have in your current land use, what kind of financial impact on the community is that as of right now? What we've seen in other communities is that when you have vacant land or 2 single-family homes on a 2-acre lot, those bring in a lot less tax revenue than a multifamily housing development does. And the multifamily housing tends to be higher revenues for the community, and it greatly offsets the services required based off what we've seen in other communities. And so when you're thinking about all the projects Newbury has to undertake in the next 5, 10, 20 years, that's going to help the revenue for the town and ease the taxpayer's burden. Hopefully you don't have to go back to their wallets every year and ask for an override, because you're diversifying your revenue sources in town.
Have you been to any of the communities that you're working with? Have they been to town meeting yet?
No. Everyone will be, not everyone, but most folks will be this May, April, May, like you all, and then we'll have a chunk the following year. So we will see.
I think, you know, how we just a couple minutes ago said that we present the A, the north and the B, the north and the south, and we have them kind of mirror imaging as far as density and what the parameters would be. That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. You know, it's consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's how we should leave it, and not bring it to Scotland and just leave it. I don't know.
2 and 2.
Yeah.
You can picture almost a grid. You have north, south, high density, low density. And you have 4 within that grid, and you put it forward like that almost.
And that way we don't have to waste time on that whole conversation, because it's going to be a conversation. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and that one, I think, you know, it's easy to look at Hanover Street, Central Street as being pretty similar in terms of the parameters that we set up. But Scotland Road, just from the discussion that we had, just seems like it would be, you know, it'd be need more protection, if I can put it
Our
that
feet
way.
are going to get stuck in the mud trying to articulate it, because we're even like getting dragged around in it as we try to understand it.
Couple days of rain, you walk out there, you're gonna be stuck in it. So,
That's a very good point, because I think people look at that and they say, well, why'd you treat Scotland Road special, and why didn't that apply anywhere else? Or they start to say, where does this mix and match? And keeping it simple in terms of how complex this all is already might be the right approach.
Yeah, keeping it simple, hopefully make the explanation to the public simple.
Mm-hmm.
Do I sense we have a consensus here?
We're moving in that direction.
I just wanted to follow up, Mary, on your comment, which was like explaining this, and just thank Ian and Kayla have just produced a fact sheet that we're just, Martha and I are reviewing, but we'll share this with you guys, and I think it's awesome. Kudos if Kayla did most of this, but both of you, it's really good. Very straightforward, you know, what is it, why is it important, what does Newbury have to do, and then like, you know, some questions and answers on the back. So this will be really good to pretty immediately get out there. And once we kind of, you know, as we're doing right now, as we finalize the actual parcels and parameters we're talking about, we'll be able to add, you know, a little more information, but this is kind of the gist of it, so.
I don't see it, but what is the graphic that looks like tombstones?
Let me pull it up here. We're finalizing the
Who died?
language, which is why we don't have
I think
it.
it's the parcels. It's our town, I think, right?
Probably not the best
Oh,
graphic.
it's the shape of.
This is what it looks
We're
like.
gonna build in the graveyards, folks.
We haven't finalized the language, which is why we haven't sent it all over to you yet.
High density
The
graveyard.
difference between the two. You're right, it doesn't look, that's funny. Yeah.
Just truck in some fill.
People are just dying to get in there.
Yeah.
Oh,
see the
no.
advertising.
It's only 4 o'clock, guys.
So once we get it all, you know, polished up, we'll send it along and we'll certainly distribute it.
I wonder if we could find some money to do it.
Yes, they do.
What was that, Larry?
Oh,
I said, I wonder if we could find some money to do a mailing,
Well, that's, if this was a mailer.
yeah?
not a good idea.
Is
Well, I
there-
mean, we'll take the tombstones out, I guess.
is there PSA stuff?
There's a lot of
Yes.
verbiage in there.
Mhm.
Maybe cut back just a tick.
Yeah.
Is
I
there
mean,
PSA?
people don't read, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pictures are better.
bold, yeah, right.
Pictures aren't good.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Pete?
Is there PSA funding anywhere when we want to do stuff like this?
We can get more funding if we want to do more community engagement around it. There is funding out there, like the 3ATA program that you guys did, you can apply again. You know how easy that form was to fill out. You can always go back there and say, we want another $200
Yeah.
to do this additional thing. And so we can talk about that if there's other
Yeah.
things that want to be done. If it is mailers or if it's anything else, we can do that. The state knows it's a big task, they're throwing money anywhere.
You know, I remember when we tried to do the fire station. I remember Jeff Walker doing a walkthrough that was on YouTube. And, you know, it showed all the things that were wrong with the fire station. And I can't believe that if anybody watched that, they just didn't throw like, let's get a new fire station right now down there. You know, because, but it was like, it was real, it was gritty. And I wonder if something, I don't know, like that might be helpful. Granted, it wasn't successful the first time.
More people watch videos than read.
They do.
Yeah, if you have a flyer that has a, you know, something you can take your phone,
Right.
a link,
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
you know, and then you can watch a couple-minute video, which is informative. But I'd be interested to, and that's great, by the way. Do you have a communication plan, you know, set from today to the day we go?
Yeah, we don't have a standard one because we change, it depends on the community. And so what we would want to do is work with, you know, obviously talking with Martha and Kristen regularly, but whatever you all think gets the word out best in your communities, so I can tell you what we are doing in other communities and see how that fits, you know, for Newbury and changing it. In some communities, we're doing additional social media graphics and sharing that out. They know they have a robust engagement on social media. In some communities, we're producing mailers. In some communities, we're having 2 community education sessions, and then we're having a pre-town meeting session where people come the night before or the week before town meeting, and we go say like, this is what's gonna happen next week, here's what you're voting on, and do like a full explainer type thing. So that's all changes depending on what folks are looking for, yeah. But I think it depends on what you all think gets the word out best here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I will say that when we were, sort of getting the word out about the master plan, a lot of the respondents said that they heard about all of it in the survey from the mailer that we sent out as opposed to,
Yeah,
it was
right.
just a
Yeah,
postcard
that's
that we sent.
Yeah, even though with the computers and email, everyone still checks their mailbox.
Yeah, so we can do a mailer, we could probably get funding for mailing things, postage.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting response,
Mhm.
given this day and age, but
We should do a memo that says, here's what's going to happen if you don't do this, folks.
Mhm.
Then you're going to lose your funding.
Certainly,
Well, it's not just.
I don't mean that, I'm just
yep.
hit them over the head with it.
Did we ever find out how much funding that we've received over the past 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, we were finalizing numbers on that, and we were looking at the past 10 years, I believe, actually.
yes.
And so the MVP program, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, which is one of the grants listed on there, for example, the town has received about $370,000 from that. Then there's a whole host of other state grants that aren't explicitly listed, but that could fall under, they have that warning and that caveat in their regulations that say, this may inform other funding decisions as the state determines necessary in other state agencies, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I mean, in aggregate, Newbury has received over $1 million in state grants over the past 10 years. Over $1.5 million,
That's
actually.
1.7.
And so when you start to look at it, you think, could they say that grant is susceptible to this? Even though they haven't explicitly said it, they gave the caveat as, it could be anything, so to speak. So we know explicitly 370,000 roughly that Newbury has received, you would probably not receive in the future. And in addition to that, there's several projects the town's looking at in the future
And I
that,
think it's fair, I mean, if it's $1.8 million, I think it's fair, because there is a realistic possibility that you would lose that.
Yes.
So if it's fair, I think you can communicate that,
Mhm.
because that does move the needle.
Mhm.
And even the 375, I perked up. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, that's a lot of money. And if you lose that,
Right, and Governor Healy has also said she hasn't explicitly identified the programs, but she said that, communities that don't comply can expect to lose funding for schools and transportation and various other things that we're used to getting, so.
So not only will we be breaking a law, because it is a
Right.
law, there'll be consequences, there'll be fines, economic fines, that are gonna increase your tax bill at the end of the day, because you're gonna have to pay more money in your taxes.
Right, and
And
they're
we
also.
wanna do that. We have
Yeah.
the lowest tax rate in the county. Why would we wanna do that? Why would you wanna create that exposure?
And the Attorney General has also said that there, may well be civil litigation, so, looking at potential legal fees as well. So, it's,
So it's not just, I think, not just what we've received, which is a significant amount of money,
Mhm.
but what's coming down the pike and what the law of the land's going to
right.
be.
And also projects, things that we want to undertake that we would no longer be eligible to get funding for. So if we really need to do them, it'll be on the taxpayer.
I mean, just how many storm drain, how many culverts or bridges do we have that are at risk right now and in a plan that need attention?
exactly.
I mean, just add those up, multiply, do an exponential number, what the construction costs are gonna be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Bam, that's the number, folks. Where are we gonna come up with that money?
we're looking at a much bigger number.
Yeah.
So a couple of residents had asked that question at the town, at the public information session, so we were finalizing a one sheet or a memo or something that can be shared publicly for folks that really breaks it down, the consequences. It's more details than I think is necessary, but we want people to know everything that's at risk here. So we were just talking this morning, we'll have something final for you all soon that can be sent to you in the select board and posted on the town website for folks to be able to read what the consequences are, really explicitly, what we're talking about.
Extremely helpful.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to figure out, to the end, really what the communication is going to look like in stages. And then, get that plan, put a price to the plan, and then go back really in whole, and maybe get $30,000, to take
Yeah, we can talk about that too, and the options out there for the town to submit any additional funding. Because the current round will run out sometime, so.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that the CHAP is looking, accepting applications now, but I don't know what the time frame actually for doing the work would be.
It's pretty flexible, yeah. So, from what I'm hearing then, some consensus, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what we're gonna move forward with and what we'll draft up for you all to take a look at for your meeting on the 17th is 4 sub-districts, 2 in the north, 2 in the south, not including Scotland Road. And we're gonna keep it simple by doing low density, high density in the north and south, and those will have the same parameters. Again, thinking about that grid maybe where you have north, south, high density, low density. Here's what that looks like and what they are. So at the end of the day, you're looking at 2 sets of dimensional parameters. One that's high and one that's low density.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, great. If I can just mention one other part of the bylaw before we conclude, and feel free if there's other things, we don't need to conclude right now, but I want to be conscious of your time and the other things you all need to discuss. The affordability component. So right now, we're requiring 10% of units to be designated as affordable. And again, going back to that definition, that means that they are affordable for an individual making up to 80% of the area median income. 10% of the units have to be at that rental price. And
Can you just define that area?
Yeah, so Newbury's in the greater Boston median income area. So your median income's pretty high compared to some of our other communities. So I believe a 1-person household, I think it's like $80,000 is affordable. You
Like
qualify.
86, I think.
80%.
Okay,
Right.
86, yep,
And is like North Andover would be in Lawrence?
correct.
So theirs is actually lower.
Yeah.
As is
Theirs is around
Oxford.
62,000.
Right.
So that has its trade-offs. Number one, obviously, you look at that and you think, $80,000, that's a good income, and is that getting at the truly affordable prices that some folks need? It also sometimes makes it more feasible for a developer to actually build because the rent can be higher. We see projects not be successful in the North Andovers, but be successful in Salisbury because they know they're gonna get a return on their investment in Salisbury, but maybe not in North Andover because they can charge higher rent. So it's kind of an interesting economic difference between the two. But the state only allows us to go at the 80% mark, so that $81,000 mark for a single person household. The thing that's important to mention here too is that we're setting the minimum at 10 units, or the threshold. So any project that's more than 10 units, that will kick in.
Right, around 10 units or more.
Yes, correct, sorry, 10 units or more. Anything, if there's a project below 10 units, they do not have an affordability requirement. And that, again, goes back to the numbers game of it may not be feasible for a developer to include an affordable unit with so few units.
And at 10 units, it's 10%.
Correct.
Right, so that allows us at 10 units to get 1 unit, so do the whole number.
And then fractionally, it just rounding up. So if they're saying they're doing, 16 units, they would have to provide 2 affordable units.
And 14?
1.
The 5 and above thing back to math.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure of that, but I think you're right.
Yeah, that's just how it's set right now. If you divide and you get a 0.5 decimal and it switches either way. Some communities, they change it. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You could say anything that works out to a decimal of 0.3 or above needs to provide 1. Some communities, we have 0.75 or above.
Some communities have a affordable housing trust fund, so they put whatever that differential is in the form of a cash contribution, which is another way of handling the problem of partial units not being able to be built.
Exactly. So we had heard some feedback on the desire to incorporate affordability. That's why we have it in there right now. Are there any questions or concerns about how we have it as of right now?
Right at the 10%?
Yeah.
You can't do less, right? We couldn't do 60% area median.
Correct. Yeah, the state would not allow you to do that. We
unless
then
we
have to
that.
do a full study to prove it, yeah. Let me just say, you don't want to do it right now in terms of keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Oh, it seems like a reasonable.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
All right.
I mean, in the draft, you know, it's just a rough draft, so I was just a little bit confused about how site plan review was gonna work in conjunction with the design guidelines, but we can maybe leave that for a later discussion.
Yeah, what we can do is write out in here, which I don't think it's written out in this draft, the procedures for application for site plan review. So right now, it follows the current site plan review portion of the bylaw, but we have to add in there their procedures for showing the design guidelines as part of the site plan review. So the site plan review would be in addition to, the design guideline application in a sense would be in addition to the site plan review paperwork.
Right, I was just a little bit confused about the enforceability, the enforcement. It would be enforced through site plan
Correct,
review.
yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And then Martha and Kristen, were there other things that we talked about that we didn't? Do you all want feedback on other areas too?
Those are the highlights of what we wanted to, I think today we really wanted to get the districts narrowed down, get consensus on that,
And we're gonna have to take a vote on the 17th, right?
well, it'll be a vote to refer
Right.
these
I
to
know
the
it's
select board, yes.
still
Yeah,
can change, but
right.
that, in order to get it on their, would it be their February meeting? Or a meeting in February?
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
to get on their first February meeting.
So, and we'll need to make that vote on the 17th.
Yes, yeah, to meet the current schedule that we have.
Yeah, it's an interesting question about the communications plan, because a lot of this is just driven by the public hearing requirements around zoning amendments, referring, and how many hearings you have to have and when they have to be. So it's just a little bit complicated to think about. That's one effort to communicate and educate and inform people and discuss, but then there likely need to be other ways that kind of communication is happening in order for town meeting to be ready for this. So we're kind of there, is I guess what I'm saying. It's like public hearings and the notices start the end of this month and early
Town meeting will be
February.
here before you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right on
So-
us.
Yeah.
We'll start getting the word out more broadly.
What's the, how many came out, was it the fire station, was that the last big one?
Well, the town hall was
Town
the last
hall.
big one.
That's
Oh,
a
town
year
hall.
ago.
Yeah,
Town hall, police station, fire station.
yeah, that, like, how many residents came for that?
It was a good turnout, I don't remember
And
how many
250
residents.
maybe,
Wow.
like that.
Big?
It was a good turnout.
Maybe even as much as 300.
Yeah, I want to say,
I
I
know
think
the
it
last
was,
one we ran out of clickers.
we did, I think it was a little over 400.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
We're talking about doing drop-in hours at some other places where we would go and hang out at the town hall for an afternoon, and if residents had questions, they could drop in and talk to us too. Things like that, whatever is accessible. Or we do drop-in hours at the library, I don't know, whatever that is, where we can be accessible for that.
Have you done any of those so far?
No, the idea has come up and we thought it was a good one, depending on who it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So we have a couple of communities that are doing where we're at.
Mhm.
Are we on the curve? Are we at the head of the curve, or are we in the middle of the curve?
I'd say you're right smack in the middle. The only reason in the middle is because some community, Haverhill, for example, they already had zoning in place that did all this. They didn't have to change anything, so they got finished quickly. North Andover's maybe a half step ahead of you, but then Rowley is right in the same place. Salisbury's right in the same place right now. Who else are we working with? Amesbury's right in the same place right now. Yeah.
That's actually good, because that's helpful to let our people know that we're all working in this region at the same pace. You know, we're not, you know, light years ahead of anybody, we're working it all together the best we can.
Georgetown, are you doing Georgetown?
Yes, Georgetown, thank you. They're in a weird spot right now. They're about in the same spot that you all are, but they have some issues that they've taken to the state that they're waiting for feedback on. So they've been paused for about a month. And then Boxford has a deadline in 2025 like you all do. So they decided to wait till next year's town meeting, and they're still crafting. So I think I have my to-dos here.
So did you get everything you need from this discussion?
This is what I was looking for. I think what really I won't be able to, what we proposed to you on those dimensional requirements, maybe we'll start with, I'll send over to you, Martha and Kristen, see if there's any red flags and some of those ideas for the low versus high density. Keep it to that fourplex kind of idea. And then come on the 17th and more discussion if that works. Yeah, I was really looking for those districts and those differences between high and low density, so.
I think that's really great stuff, Ian, and thank you. You know, now as we think about this and we think about the design configuration, which are really gonna be the things that are gonna, when we get to the next conversation with people in the community, hey, look, we've looked into this, and this, and this, and this is how we really wanna protect our interests and our needs, and be mindful of our community and allow this to occur.
Definitely. And I owe you all thank you for doing your meeting at 3 p.m. We have another night meeting this week, so we'll take it having only one night meeting now. We'll get to do you in the afternoon. So.
That works for everybody.
Yep, that's good. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Might not even be
Actually,
dark
that was
out yet.
Kristen.
I know.
Thank you.
The days are getting longer now, so
Yeah. You notice that?
if we gave 40 minutes of daylight in the month of January.
That much?
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks,
it's been
So long,
nice
thanks a
here.
Tell
million.
Kevin to feel better.
I will, thank you.
Is it 40 minutes?
Yeah, I saw a map yesterday. Florida only gains 20 minutes of daylight in the month of January, but where we are, we gain 40
This is
minutes.
our tilt. We're equator based.
I thought it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
I think most of it's in the morning, but there's more,
So summer's right around the corner.
you gain more
Yep.
in the morning hours than
It will be.
yeah. Before we know it, it'll be fall. Yeah. Thanks.
Next item, Martha, you want to talk about the wireless communication facilities?
Sure. So this is a follow-up on the discussions that we had previously when we updated our wireless communications facilities bylaw and worked with David Matson. And he had recommended that doing the drive-through, he had noted that there are areas in town that still have very low coverage, no matter which provider you're looking at, and suggested that we look at increasing our communications tower district to include potentially an area down in this neck of the woods in Byfield, specifically the Triton parcels, to allow towers on, or a tower at least, on those parcels, and also to provide coverage in the sort of known low coverage dead zone on High Road to potentially look at the parcel that includes the highway line of 197 High Road. So what I've done here is to format things the way we typically do when there's zoning amendments for town meeting, is just add in the changes in bold italic under the tower use restrictions. And this is only 2 pages from what I sent you last night. I sent everything last night just so you have it all in context. But for today, just the tower use restrictions, and the description of the areas is based on how we've described other areas in the overlay district or even underlying district where we're looking at specific parcels. So in this case, an area in the agricultural residential district on the northerly and southerly sides of Elm Street encompassing Lot 18 on the FY 2024 Assessors Map R17 and Lot 60 on the FY 2024 Assessors Map R-01. And then for the High Road parcel, an area in the agricultural residential district on the easterly side of High Road encompassing Lot 36 on FY 2024 Assessors Map R32. So that's just consistent with how we've designated and described these parcels elsewhere. And then along with that will need to be a map amendment. So the maps that are included, the first one is the Business and Light Industrial District, which is where our wireless communications tower district is right now. And then the second one shows the two parcels owned by Triton, and the third is the High Road parcel. So these would need to be put forward as map amendments for the zoning overlay district.
We typically do that in one warrant article, or would it have to be broken up into two, one for the text and one for the map?
I'm trying to remember how we've done it before. I think we could do it as one warrant article, but I would want to check with town council on that, what the best format is.
The articles themselves would be pretty straightforward, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is the simplest one. And as we discussed previously, we've discussed the Elm Street, the Triton parcels with Superintendent Forget, who has discussed it with the school committee, and they are in support of including these parcels in the district.
You were going to reach out to David Maxon to see if we could get some sense of what sort of rental the school or the
Yeah,
town
I haven't.
could.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet, I'm sorry.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, don't. It's a good selling point.
And the same for the town as well.
Let's say for the town, right.
Yeah. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Martha, didn't you tell me at one point that there is someone interested in that parcel?
Verizon had contacted the town expressing interest in that parcel and was interested in whether we were going to consider.
Yeah, although there's a problem with the
allowing it.
size, I guess.
So there are some issues with the size of the parcel and the fall zone, the setback requirement for the tower. So, in any case, they might be looking for a variance, but at least it would be an allowed use.
And it would certainly improve service down that part of town.
Right.
I think Low Street too, Woody, right?
Oh, yeah.
You got a problem down there.
Yeah. It depends on the weather, but it's a challenge on Low Street. And even driving from, say, the First Settlers Burial Ground to almost Tendercroft, that section of High Road is rough
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's weather dependent, because some days I'll have service right at the kitchen table, and other days I'm outside with my phone out in the driveway to try and send a text message.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
So I think this one is pretty straightforward. It's really more a question of whether we can put it all in one zoning amendment or need to do it in two.
And just, I know it's been brought up before or whatever, but what about Plum Island and the beach? Are we doing a thing where we allow pole mounted?
So I think the small cell would really probably fall down there. Not a tower, but I shouldn't say fall down, but be applicable down there. I know that Verizon had looked at putting a small cell facility or an antenna on one of the existing poles down there, but I think at that time we didn't have the small cell provisions in our bylaw.
What I guess what I'm saying is we do now.
We do now,
Yes,
yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah,
Because I know the beach is a challenge too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that would almost have to be small cell down there.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it couldn't be a tower.
Yeah.
And it might be that putting the tower on High Road, if one were to go up there, could actually provide coverage down on Plum Island too, because it would be kind of a shot across the marsh.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's amazing what even, there's a tower at in Raleigh at the old junkyard off of 1A. Old Town Hill is, it's causing this problem on, from where the highway barn is and places like Low Street, because the Old Town Hill blocks the signal.
Where is Low Street?
Plumbers, well, part of it's Plumbers Lane and turns into Low Street. Plumbers Lane comes out on High Road. Low Street pops out on Hay Street, right before Green Street.
Gotcha.
And there's other areas too, along Orchard Street, there's problems. So. But with the tower in this area of the school would hopefully help.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate public safety issue.
Yeah.
That service.
So what's the status of the tower at Triton? Do we have any?
So this would just enable, if there were a provider who was interested in putting a tower in that area, this would enable that to happen. You know, there's no proposal from any provider to put a tower there right now. But it could if this bylaw amendment passes, it could happen.
Right, no, I understand that. I just wonder if anybody had been mumbling about it behind the scenes. We have dead zones where I am, which is off Elm, right before you get to the Congregational
Yep.
Church, and that very small graveyard goes up. Elm turns into, I can't remember the name of it, sorry, Warren, or you can take a right onto Parish, go down Larkin. But the whole area where we are, which is Colby Lane, has dead zones. And I can show you the dead zones just by walking past them, and it's automatic. Half of our house doesn't pick up a signal. And I know there's a line, it goes straight down Parish, probably goes farther back, all the way to our house and probably keeps going. So.
Interesting, huh?
I didn't know that.
No, I didn't either.
It's funny, I could have a signal in my driveway and go down the street to the corner of Plumbers and Low Street. The hill really does its job there, and you lose signal. You don't have signal until you get back up onto High Road and go one way, right or left to get away from the blockage from the hill from the Raleigh Tower. But, and his driving, Maxim's driving map really showed did a good job of showing where you had signal and you did.
Yeah.
Are there restrictions on a municipality to do a ground lease with a communication company like Verizon? So you would get, revenue, on town-owned land.
I believe, and I might be incorrect about this, but I think if it is town-owned land, I think there might need to be town meeting approval for the lease, but I don't know that for sure.
Does the lease have to go out for bid?
And I think if somebody's coming to, I don't know. I don't know.
And with the Triton properties too, who technically owns
Yeah,
Triton?
right.
Triton.
That's what I mean.
Triton.
So they would, if someone proposed a tower there, then they could
Triton benefits,
benefit.
which is actually,
Yeah, that's good, that's good.
There are two parcels there. There's
Yeah.
where the school is, but they also, across Elm Street, they have a big parcel there.
Right.
I think their septic system.
Their septic system is there. It's on the left-hand side if you're looking down at the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily going to be on top of the school or anything like that.
Yeah, we used to do,
Right,
we
that's
used to
what
do
it
Project
sounds like.
Adventure out there. we'd walk the sidewalk and go to the other parcel
Okay.
for the Project Adventure. We were in school then.
What was the adventure?
Getting there and getting back, I think.
Getting ourselves
That
straight.
during school or
In one
after?
piece. We're in school,
Kids out of
gym
the building,
class.
that's what-
Was it set up as a rope?
Yeah, there was we did ropes across the water crossing that you can see from, what street is it, School Street or Elm Street?
Yeah.
We'd go across ropes across there.
Huh.
It's a, I don't know, breath of fresh air, I
Does
guess.
any of it still exist?
I think they ended that
Infrastructure?
program because of liability, to be honest with you.
Because Governors has a
Between the
rope
water
course
crossing
that
with the ropes and
nobody uses.
you left school property to participate in the Project Adventure.
Krista, what did you say about the
I said
governors?
Governors has a ropes course that doesn't get used anymore, hasn't been used, it's covered with poison ivy, but still in the woods.
Sounds like a planning board leadership.
It was a big thing for a while,
It's
yeah.
on the
But no, I think they ended Project Adventure because of liability.
So is the High Road, is that municipally owned? Is that, we own that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's DPW facility. I think.
So cell towers are good earners.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great fact to be able to present to town meeting.
It does, the Triton would be an indirect benefit, still a benefit. The High Road piece would be a direct benefit. And the fire department could be the biggest benefit, provided, you know, they need fire alarm cable, or they're gonna go wireless, or improves their life safety, all good stuff.
All right, anything else on that one?
Good? No, guess not.
Okay. So the other one is some proposed changes to the language of the Water Supply Protection Overlay District language. And this is something that actually came up a while ago. We were looking at the references that are in here under allowed uses, and I've highlighted them on your handout here. They actually, we were thinking that they were referring to prohibited uses and uses and activities by special permit within the language of this bylaw itself, but they actually refer to sections of the bylaw in Article 3 that no longer exist anymore.
So you just want to strike those or replace them with something?
So if you look at the other attachment here, and we discussed this with town council, and it's relevant actually because, particularly now, because 3 of our sub-districts fall within the Water Supply Protection Overlay District. And there's a provision under uses allowed by special permit that requires that any project that's going to have 15% or more of impervious surface, or 2,500 square feet, whichever's greater, requires a special permit from the select board. So there are actually kind of two parts of this. So I'll go back to this first. So we went back and looked at some prior zoning to see whether this was just kind of a mistake, like a Scrivener's error, or something else, because zoning has been sort of redone, major redos twice since 1999. And going back to the 1999 version, it appears to be clear that those references really should be to the activities by special permit within the language of this bylaw itself. So if you look at the markup here, the references have all been changed to refer to those sections of this bylaw, you know, specifically for 4B3. But we discussed this with town council, and 2 things. One was, if we were going to make changes, there were other things that need to be corrected or updated. Some of them are simple, like changing Board of Selectmen to Select Board throughout. Some is making reference to review by bodies that no longer exist, like the Board of Water Commissioners, in which case that would be a change to the Byfield Water District for any projects that fall within that district. Some of them are sort of application procedures. So what you have in front of you right now is kind of, it's a work in progress. Kristen made a lot of suggested modifications. They've been reviewed with town council. We've done a second iteration, and this will go back to town council. I just wanted to see if there was any feedback from you all prior to sending it back to her. The other part of this is that she has advised that in our MBTA communities bylaw language, we can basically say that notwithstanding any other provisions of the zoning, no special permit will be required, other than the permitting that's required by the MBTA communities bylaw. And we're still waiting for some guidance on that from the state.
So, in other words, this wouldn't apply to the MBTA's?
Correct. So that language would be included in the applicability section of the MBTA bylaw that Ian has been working on.
And I don't know what, I assume this bylaw, the water supply protection bylaw is required at some level by the state via regulation or something. In other words, would the state regulatory authorities be okay with that?
I think, well, you looked at.
So what's interesting about Newbury's Water Supply Protection Overlay District is there isn't actually an active water supply
For the
for-
northern district.
for the district with the parcels on Route 1, that area for the MBTA. So my understanding, correct me, Martha, but we have talked about this because I think it probably doesn't need to be said, but protection of our town's water supply is of paramount
Probably a good
importance.
idea, yeah.
So those, that's the first question I certainly had, and I think most people would have. This overlay district was established at a time where there was an analysis done to show that those would be good locations for future water supply. So it's, was smart planning at the time to protect the land in this way with this overlay district zoning. We haven't ever developed that water supply. And the other thing I think is relevant is, in addition, there are now other mechanisms, site plan review, stormwater bylaw, that didn't exist at the time that this overlay district was established. So I think it's important to know that any project in the water supply overlay district would have plenty of permitting that would be looking at protection of the water supply in that district. It just wouldn't be necessarily a part of a special permit with the select board.
Right, and specifically this says that for any use that will render impervious more than 15% or 2,500 square feet, whichever is greater, a system for groundwater recharge must be provided which does not degrade groundwater quality. So now with site plan review and our stormwater management, all of that is covered, and we would explicitly carry this language over into the MBTA communities bylaw, so it's covered. So the requirement would still be met, it would just not be part of a special permit that's issued by some other body.
And not violate the as of right provisions of the
Right.
MBTA
Right,
communities.
right, exactly.
Okay.
So we're sort of dealing with two things here. One is the relationship to the MBTA communities, but the other, looking at all of that, just trying to correct some references.
Well,
which are-
certainly no reason not to correct the thing.
So I don't know if you all had a chance to look at this or not, if you want to go through all the red lines I kind of summarized. Or we can send this on back to town council for any
Well,
further.
we're gonna need to vote on this in a second. I'd suggest you send it up to town council. Anybody disagree with that?
I didn't hear what you said.
I suggested that Martha send it off to town council,
Yes.
the way it is.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, we're 2 weeks away from a vote, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you do this through the holiday?
No.
33, we're good.
Did you do this through the holiday?
All right, so that's the docket for town meeting.
Not quite. Oh, for town
For
meeting,
town
yeah,
meeting,
we're not
yes,
done yet.
yes.
because-
Yeah, not with the agenda, but for
No,
town meeting.
no, because Kristen will never forgive me if we don't vote on these meeting minutes.
Keep them up to date.
Good job with working through the holiday.
So has everyone had an opportunity to review the December 6th and December 20th meeting minutes?
I did not.
You have not,
I did not.
okay.
Well, go ahead and class,
I'm honest.
Okay.
get that guy gold star.
Do you want to hold it?
I'm sorry.
Or
It's up to you guys.
or you can abstain and then take a vote?
Yeah. Wait, how's
You good with that? Okay. Would anyone care, well, I've reviewed them, I have no issues with them. Would anyone care to make a motion to approve the December 6th and December 20th meeting minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you, Woody and Mary. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? We don't have to take a roll call for that. Mary, yes?
I am.
Okay. Any nay? One abstention. 4 in favor, 1 abstain.
We've been doing roll call votes for a while.
I know, it's not, I'm not having to do that.
3 years?
Yeah,
I got confused.
I know it, I know.
All right.
Well,
I'm a little concerned that the water supply related district thing is gonna bog us down.
they bog us down with the state.
No, just people understanding what it's about. Do you know what I mean? They're gonna have a lot to digest just with this other stuff.
Put it on for last, can we?
It'll still be out there.
Yeah, it needs to be corrected, huh?
It does. I'm just,
Yeah.
fatigue factor, what the hell, this is gonna be a dump of green. It's gonna be down to dwindled numbers at that time.
I mean, I think essentially what it really boils down to is being, correction of some Scrivener's errors and
And that's how I think it should be.
housekeeping.
Yeah, that's all.
Strictly housekeeping.
It's housekeeping.
We're not changing a thing, we're just,
Which it is, the reference does not exist. The current language,
Right, this was
Doesn't
drafted
exist.
years ago, there've been numerous amendments to the bylaws, and it's out of date. and not corrected.
I can already hear some individuals jumping up and down.
Yeah.
But when you mention those words, just because they're gonna be jumping up and down. So I think, we just cleaning up the language, not
Right.
changing a thing.
Yeah.
The discussion really is about the language.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely it. You got a larger explanation today because of everything we're talking about. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
This is important, I just want to say.
Keep it
Okay.
short and simple.
Well, we're done. Anybody want to go home?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
Third.
All those in favor? Aye.
Opposed?
We're adjourned, unanimous.
I know.
Adjourned.